Welcome everyone to the third Thursday meetup of the West Orlando WordPress Meetup Group. I'm Rob Watson, a co-organizer and host. West Orlando WordPress is an official WordPress meetup group and is affiliated with the main WordPress Orlando and WordCamp US meetup groups. What is technical debt and why should we talk about it? Whether we realize it or not, we all deal with technical debt. A simple example of technical debt is shoving JavaScript into header.php instead of putting it in functions.php, or trying out 10 different plugins on the live site that adds junk into the database. Aaron will discuss what this is, how to avoid at least some of it, and why you should be talking to your clients about it. Tonight's presenter is Aaron Reimann. Aaron is a PHP developer that started and sold an agency called Sideways8.com. He is currently running ClockworkWP, a development and hosting shop. He has built sites for companies of all shapes and sizes, ranging from small nonprofits to Fortune 100 companies, since beginning his work with WordPress in 2008. An organizer for WordCamp Atlanta and the Atlanta WordPress Meetup, Aaron provides leadership and speaks regularly at events throughout the WordPress community. At this point, I'd like to invite everyone to mute their microphones for the presentation. And Aaron, thank you for being our presenter this evening. The time is now yours.
But thank you for the introduction. I'm just a WordPress guy, probably similar to you guys, build websites for clients. And this talk, to be completely honest, a friend of mine, we were at synagogue, and he said, man, I'm dealing with so much technical debt. And then he just kind of like vented and talked about all the problems that he's having at this new job. And I just thought, man, I've been missing this term because it's such a good term that if you're selling a website or selling services, I think it's a really good term for people to start using because it kind of encapsulates a lot of the headaches that we have. So I'm just going to dive into my slides in here. Feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you guys have questions, whatnot. Twitter handle is Reimann, and then my email address, and I'll have the exact same slide at the end, so you can snag that. But feel free to shoot me an email if you guys have questions. Afterwards, if you can't, if you have something specific that's going to suck up 30 minutes, let's schedule a time to talk. Let me change slides in here. Here we go. So why this topic? I hear clients all the time say, can we do this? And I always tell the clients, well, of course, we can do anything. It just really depends on how much money they have and how hard is it to do. For example, if someone comes and says, hey, can you build this where we can receive some information, someone like, let's just say capture data, someone's first name, email address, and you hit submit and that data is saved and then sent somewhere, that's going to require a plugin. Well, with the plugin, there's some technical debt that's going to be associated with that. The database is going to be a little bit bigger, but I try to always start clients off, like, yes, we can do this. Let's talk about, how we get there, to the end goal there. So what is technical debt? And I'm actually going to read this. Technical debt is a concept in software development that reflects the implied cost of additional rework caused by choosing an easy, limited solution now instead of using a better approach that would take longer. So that's the technical definition, and I'm going to go through, and like I said in one of the slides before, a lot of this stuff comes from thank you for Wikipedia for this technical debt and this page, because a lot of these things came from there, and I'm kind of going through and explaining all of these points that are on that page. So what can cause technical debt? One of them is ongoing development. if a project, let's say you start now, but it's a massive project and it's going to take 2 years to develop. Well, in 2 years, the technology that you used 2 years ago is no longer going to be current, or there's a chance that it's no longer current. So just ongoing development or projects that take too long can uh, cause technical debt, because by the time you're done, you look back at it and you're like, oh, well, now there's this new tool that's out there. Another thing that can cause technical debt is insufficient upfront definition, whereas a client will come and say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z, and you just say, "Oh, yeah, we can do that. Sign the contract." Without going through and actually going through the process and actually understanding what their needs are, that can cause technical debt. Business pressure. I don't deal with that too much because I don't have products that are where I'm trying to compete with, the newest, greatest thing. Like I'm trying to think of a good example. I think of like teamwork. I'm assuming some of you guys use a project management tool, and if teamwork is trying to, that's a software that I use, but if you have like Basecamp, trying to compete, and Monday, they're all trying to compete. They have business pressures that they're trying to get, out the door. And so people will try to bust out, to be the first to deliver this product. That's going to cause a business pressure, where you try to get it out the door before your competitors. Lack of process or understanding. That is one thing that I learned over the years, is that everything has to be documented, and we need a process for everything. And anytime you try to go out of those processes, they're going to wind up coming back and biting you. For example, I mean, just as simple as we have a form that when people sign up, for us to build a website, we make them fill out this form that gets their DNS information, where their DNS is, where, what the registrar is. And if that step is skipped, it's going to cause a problem later when we try to go live. I mean, just a real simple example, but that's, lack of understanding is going to come back and get you. Tightly coupled components. When you're developing applications, you can build them for one little use or two little uses. Like this function does this, and that's it. And then if you don't think big picture, you think, oh, well, I could have written that function now where it accepts parameters, where that function now becomes more flexible. So not doing that is a good thing. Lack of a test suite, and this is what I see in WordPress everywhere. Very few people write tests, and I'm guilty of this too. But there are ways to write tests to test your theme or the plugin that you're using. So a lack of a test suite can get you. Lack of documentation. I always use the if you get run over by a bus scenario. And if I'm the only one that has been working on this project, I'm hit by a bus and I didn't write anything down, that's going to come back and get you. Lack of collaboration. This could be if you outsource stuff to a team, and you're not talking to them every day to make sure that the project is documented or written the way it needs to be done. Lack of collaboration can come back and get you. Parallel development, and I don't see any questions in here, so everyone's good. Okay. Parallel development on multiple branches. This I don't see so much in the WordPress community because most of the time it's a small team of one or two people writing this. But if you are doing stuff with a massive team, parallel development on multiple branches, that'll come back and get you. Like I always tell people, yes, use Git, it's great. But sometimes if you'll have collisions basically when you try to develop on different branches, and that can conflict. That's not a big issue. Definitely use Git. I'm not saying don't use Git, but I'm just saying you might have some branch collisions issues. Delayed refactoring can be, for example, if you are working on a project and you realize immediately, like, um, I submitted this data into the system and it processes and it only takes 1 second. That's great. And it was 5-10 rows of data. That's great. But not thinking, okay, let's test this now with 1 million rows of data. And you were going to realize that, oh, well, that needs to be refactored because that's extremely slow. It works great with 5 rows, but if it's 1 million rows of data, it's going to be slow. Delaying the fact that that needs to be refactored and rewritten, will cause a little technical debt. I'm going to skip lack of alignment. Well, no, I guess I will, because it is a WordPress community, and we do have WordPress standards. If you guys aren't familiar, there's a way that PHP should be written, and there's a way to write CSS, things like that. It's not going to break anything, but if you're writing stuff to standards, it's going to make it easier if you get hit by a bus, or if you hand the project over to someone else. If you are following standards, WordPress standards, PHP standards, and things like that, it's going to make it easier for someone to come in and fill in the gap. Lack of knowledge. I've been there, where I've written stuff, and I think of when I first started dealing with WordPress. It was December of 2008, and I just needed a list of pages. A PHP developer friend of mine said, "Hey, you know PHP? Great, come here, help me with this WordPress thing." And I knew nothing about WordPress. And I just needed to list pages. And so I did what you shouldn't do. I did a select star from WP post where, the ID is this, where, there's a function in WordPress to list pages. That's what I could have used, but I just didn't know. And you'll see that in the WordPress community everywhere. I see the number one thing that I see is, I'll see jQuery being called just like shoved into the header as opposed to in queuing it. And that will eventually break your site when you're calling jQuery from a third-party site where WordPress is expecting a specific version of jQuery for WordPress, for that version of WordPress. That'll cause, like, it gets the job done, but because I didn't know that it needed to be written this way, it's going to cause a problem in the future, creating a little technical debt. Lack of ownership. I don't think we would see a lack of ownership so much unless you're just outsourcing stuff. But lack of ownership, if could cause technical debt if someone's not paying attention when something is being developed. So specifically, like if it's outsourced, you just want to get it done. Once the project's done, then you get it, and then you look at it later. You're like, oh great, this was not written the right way. That's a lack of ownership, and that's gonna cause some issues. Poor technical leadership, or I can't even say that. Poor technological leadership. I'll see this occasionally. And I'm probably guilty of this too. Whereas I used to have a few developers. I'm making decisions where I might have a couple of developers that know more than me, but because I'm a know-it-all, I'm going to make these decisions because I think technology X is the best, technology. Whereas I could have the developers that like, man, I don't want to use that technology, but because the boss said so, that creates a little technical debt. And then last minute specification changes. And this is where I will make clients do a change request. But last minute specifications on things is gonna just cause technical debt. So quiet. Is everything good? Someone unmute and say yes.
It's all good.
All right, cool. All right, may the guilty party stand. Like I said, we all create technical debt, and the next slide's gonna kind of explain that. WordPress creates technical debt. It's just technical debt that we're willing to live with, because without it, we'd be much slower creating a site. So, for example, a static HTML site is going to be much faster than a WordPress site, right? But as far as load time, it's going to load faster because it doesn't have to load, all the JavaScript. It doesn't load. It doesn't hit the database. It doesn't do all these things. But with that, then it's just a static HTML site that's really hard for people to manage themselves. So because of that, I'm willing to say, okay, I can build you a better website that has more functionality. The site's just going to be a little slower because we're going to be hitting the database and it's going to be loading, images and JavaScript and stuff like that. So that's a little technical debt that that is expected in the WordPress community, and that's true with any content management system, whether it be Drupal or Joomla or whatever the latest craze is. I don't know anymore because I'm so stuck in WordPress world. So some default WordPress debt, security risks. So like if you are trying to think of a good security risk. So there's 50 plus thousand WordPress plugins, that are out there, and you can start tinkering with all of them. You can install 50,000 plugins probably and activate all of them. It's just going to open the risk of, okay, do I know that these plugins are written, really well? My guess is that probably 10% of the plugins in the WordPress community are written well. The rest of them are someone had a good idea and it worked that one time and they released it and then it's not maintained. That becomes a major security risk. Plugin updates is technical debt. So I would say actually not updating them is more of a technical debt, because I'm a big fan of Gravity Forms, and I've never had Gravity Forms break, but if I don't update that plugin, there's a chance that there's a security risk not updating it, and not updating it or updating it might break some functionality that I have. Gravity Forms, that's probably a bad example. Let's say Visual Composer, like that. If you update that, that might break something. And you have to be willing to, take that risk. WordPress updates, theme updates, in hosting, all of those things are some technical debt that we have to deal with. Hopefully, we're using good hosting, and I'll be kind and not mention slow hosting out there. But I mean, that's just some of the examples out there. So let me look at this slide real quick. So okay, what are some examples of debt? I think I just listed some, but I'm going to go through a couple more, and then actually want to kind of keep this. I'm going to open this up to people to make some comments. But using a plugin when it's just one line of code that needs to be added. Don't, if you need jQuery, or let's say you need to load some kind of like a Google font, don't go just grab a Google font plugin, to activate that. That's probably one line of code that could be added into functions.php, and then you don't have one more plugin, because I kind of have the idea of if you have more than 15 to 17 plugins, chances are you're probably doing something wrong, or you need to probably start writing some things from scratch. So shoving code into the header, I see that all the time when people modify header.php, and they'll just drop in their little short code for like for their Facebook pixel. There's an actual way that you're supposed to enqueue those type of things, and by not doing it the proper way, you're going to open it up to not work in the future. Creating custom post types and putting them in the theme. That's one of the things that I see a lot of times in there, where a custom oh sorry, creating a custom post type and just going into your child theme and putting it in there is going to create a little technical debt, as opposed to write a plugin to do that. The Using a plugin. Oh, I just kind of covered that one. Not creating a child theme. A lot of times people will start building a site, and they'll be really happy with it, and then they need to add some CSS, and then they're like, okay, where do we put the CSS, or how do we modify this theme? And it's like, well, you should have created a child theme, because that would allow us to be flexible in that way. So those are a couple examples. Does anyone have any other examples of technical debt? WordPress specifically technical debt? I'm going to take a second and drink my tea. No technical debt?
I think some hosting can represent technical debt, just having things scattered all over a single host. Too many subdomains for different things that you thought you might do. Lots of stuff like that can really gum up the works.
Yeah, I think about that, and then I also think like multi-site. I've seen a lot of people think that, oh, multi-site WordPress multi-site's a really good idea, and it and so they'll say, well, I might have some subsites that I need in the future, and it's like well, that opens the door to, like, your site's going to be slower. It's there, and updating plugins is going to be more of a problem. But yeah, I mean, hosting is, to me, one of the number one things that slows down your site, and making bad hosting decisions will get you. So, Brian, are you unmuted on
Yeah,
purpose?
I was gonna say, what about multiple of the same kind of plugins? So, for example, I like WordFence. Should I add WordFence? But gee, my host has their own security site scanner, so I assume probably if I have both of those, I'm going to have some technical debt. It could be other optimization, multiple optimizing kinds of plugins. I assume that's going to create technical debt.
Yeah, that'll cause issues. I kind of think about, I use and I don't know how to pronounce this plugin because it's weird, but optimize.
I call it auto optimize. Yes, I'm with you.
Auto optimize. Yeah, I don't know, but that's a great plugin. But if you have SiteGround, SiteGround has a plugin that they use that does a very similar thing. I don't know if they would actually conflict, but definitely make sure that you don't have redundant plugin functionality, because they could be fighting, for certain things that could cause a conflict. So that's super common. I see that mostly where I'll see, like, I actually have a client it's an Elementor site, and they have two slider plugins on there too. And I kind of inherited this, but I'm thinking, why are there two slider plugins? Does an Elementor have a slider? So seeing when you see lots of redundancy like that, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. But I'll see Gravity Forms and Ninja Forms on the same site, where it's amazing how I've looked at a bunch of different plugins that weren't needed before, and they didn't do anything on the front end. But I disabled 3 or 4 different plugins, and the site loaded faster. And they weren't plugins that were really needed. So that definitely can cause issues. 2 plugins that do practically the same thing.
Well, and I've been, at fault to doing that. For example, I'd start a site and I would say, oh, I like Ninja Forms, so I'm going to use Ninja Forms. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, I need to take some e-commerce, and Ninja Forms doesn't do that, but WP Forms does that. So I'll get WP Forms in to do the particular kind of form that needs to take the e-commerce that the Ninja Forms didn't take. So now I got two form plugins on there. This plugin is doing certain forms, and this other plugin is doing certain other forms. And then it's like, I really don't want to go back and have to scrape out all the old forms and rebuild them now in the WP Forms. So I have both on the site.
Yeah, and that's just all that's going to do is slow your site down a little bit, and not only that, if you get run over by a bus, the person that comes in behind you is going to be like, why are there 2 plugins that do the exact same thing? Someone has to clean that up at some point. I mean, my guess is that most sites, though, I mean, after 3 or 4 years, they probably scrap it and just rebuild from scratch anyway. But I mean, there are some sites out there where they have content that they can't just scrap it and start over. And you have to come up with solutions. Come up with a plan on, okay, by this date we're going to migrate every form over to Ninja Forms, or vice versa, whichever way you're going. So that's important. I'm going to go to the next slide now. So that's some types of debt. Like I said, so from what I can see, you can't avoid it. There's only so much you can do by installing WordPress, and by installing your bare minimum. You still have some kind of technical debt that you're creating, but the goal is to do as little technical debt as possible. Like in the slide, WordPress is going to change, PHP is going to change, server environments are going to change. Those things you don't know if when you switch to PHP version 8 if your site's going to work, but the good thing is, if you've done it properly, you've only used plugins that are up to date, that stay up to date. If you have a plugin that's 5 years old and you switch to PHP version 8, chances are that's going to break and you're going to have to fix that. That's why you always want to make sure that your plugins are maintained. So WordPress has gotten a lot better than the way it was 5 or 6 years ago. Things now don't show up in the repository. If it hasn't been updated in the past 2 years and you're searching for plugins, those plugins won't show up, which is really nice. But all right, what can we do to prevent technical debt? Have clear specifications up front. One of the things that I tell people, someone comes to me with an idea and they say, hey, I need a website that can do X, Y, and Z. I say, great, go write that down, and give me a 2-pager on, what needs to be done. That's how you get rid of 90% of your friends, or people that come up and ask you that, because most people won't write it down. But I always want people to, if they can't verbalize, their idea, they're not, I guess, dedicated, to doing it. So, but get them to write things down. That's super important. Invest in quality developers. If you guys have a project that you're going to be doing, and you're like, man, I know I'm going to need someone to write this third-party API integration. I'm not saying don't go to Upwork, but make sure that they're vetted. Find a developer that can have a conversation with the person that's going to be writing this and see if they seem to know. I mean, heck, I'd do that for people too. If they needed, like, hey, I'm thinking about using this developer, I could probably have a conversation and vet them. So that's one of the things you can do to prevent technical debt. Follow follow standards. Oh, and I keep clicking. Okay. um, Follow standards, and I kind of covered that a little bit in the WordPress standards, but follows standards, dev standards, because it's going to make it a lot easier for people to pick up. Writing tests, which again, not too many people write tests for plugins and for themes and stuff like that, but it is possible to do, and that's important. It'll save you time in the long run. Writing tests is not easy sometimes, but it's definitely worth it. Document the code and decisions. Anytime you change something in a plugin or a theme or something that you've written, it's always good to say, hey, this was changed and here's why. Put it in the code or document it somewhere. Have a good little Google Doc out there explaining it, because a year later, you're not going to remember why you did what you did. So that's important. Communicate. I always, anytime we're building a project, it could just be a marketing site, or it could be, we could be writing a plugin for a client. We always have a standing call, just to make sure that we're all on the same page every day. So, or not every day, we do it once a week. That way, we're not losing any type of ideas or something that needs to be communicated, that we have a place to discuss those things. Create a roadmap, have a maintenance plan, and I'm a big maintenance guy, because I have about like 50 or so sites on care plans. Having a maintenance plan is great. You can sell it. It's definitely marketable, and it gives you some recurring revenue. So having a maintenance plan is super important. Not only just, because you get revenue from it, but it's good for the client, because I'm in their site at least once a month, going in, testing things, making sure things work. And then another thing that helps is being assertive, being able to being willing to do what it takes to get clarification. Call the client, and if they can't get you an answer, don't work until you have that answer. Be assertive. What else out there could help prevent technical debt? And actually, this will be kind of like the end of the talk, so we can just open this up for discussion too. But what are some other things that could prevent the creation of technical debt?